We were always known as the most curious and fearless group in town. I, Lucas, Anna, Peter, and Julia had been inseparable since childhood. Growing up in a small town meant there weren't many entertainment options, so we constantly sought new adventures. One night while we were all gathered in the square, Anna suggested something that would change our lives forever: exploring the old house on the hill. It was said to be haunted, but we never believed in legends. We decided we would be the first to uncover its mystery. On Friday night, armed with flashlights and newfound courage, we headed to the house. The ancient structure stood tall against the night sky, its broken windows and vine-covered walls giving it an air of abandonment and mystery. The front door creaked as it opened, revealing a dusty, cobweb-covered interior. We walked slowly through the dark hallways, our steps echoing ominously. The first rooms we explored were filled with old furniture, covered in dirty sheets. We found crooked paintings on the walls and moldy books on the shelves. As we moved forward, small incidents heightened our tension. Unexplained noises, doors closing by themselves, and shadows that seemed to move. In the kitchen, the discovery of recent food scraps and dirty clothes alarmed us. Someone was living there, but who? We began to realize that our exploration might be more dangerous than we had thought. In one of the bedrooms, Peter found an old diary, its pages yellowed and brittle. As we flipped through it, we discovered it belonged to a man named Edward, who had lived in the house many years ago. The last pages were filled with incoherent ramblings about voices and shadows he saw in the house. As we tried to decipher the diary, we heard a noise coming from upstairs. Trembling, we climbed the stairs and encountered a strange man. He was tall and thin, with dirty clothes and wide eyes. He muttered to himself while watching us. We froze, not knowing what to do. Before we could react, he ran towards one of the doors and disappeared. We decided it was time to leave, but when we tried to open the front door, it was locked. The windows were also sealed. Panic began to set in. We tried to find another way out, but all the doors were locked. We returned to the room where we found the diary, and to our horror, noticed that the man had left a message written on the wall with a piece of charcoal. "You will never leave here." The man reappeared, watching us with a sinister smile. He told us the house was his, and that we couldn't leave. His eyes were filled with madness, and his erratic behavior terrified us. We tried to talk to him, but his answers were confusing and incoherent. He always seemed one step ahead, disappearing and reappearing in different parts of the house. Our situation became desperate when we realized that the man was watching us all the time. Every time we tried to find a way out, he was there, blocking our path. We started to feel like rats in a maze, with no way out. The tension increased with every minute, and the feeling of claustrophobia was overwhelming. In a moment of desperation, Lucas suggested we try to break down one of the doors. We used everything we could find: chairs, iron bars, and even pieces of wood, but nothing worked. The man seemed to enjoy our futile efforts, laughing as he watched us. The situation reached its peak when the man attacked us. He appeared suddenly, armed with a rusty knife. We tried to fight back, but he was surprisingly strong. One by one, we were overpowered and tied up. He took us to the basement, a damp, dark place with stone walls and a musty smell. We were locked in a small cell, with only a small barred window letting in a bit of light. The feeling of despair and helplessness was overwhelming. We tried to understand why he was doing this, but his answers were always confusing. He spoke of voices guiding him and shadows pursuing him. His mind seemed fragmented, and it was clear that he was not in his right mind. Lucas, always the most resourceful of the group, began planning a way to escape. He noticed that one of the bars on the window was loose and started working to remove it. While he did this, we tried to distract the man by talking to him and asking questions. Every minute felt like an eternity, but finally, Lucas managed to free the bar. One by one, we squeezed through the small opening. Outside, we ran like never before, not looking back. The man didn't follow us, perhaps thinking we were still locked in the cell. When we finally reached the town, we were a group of traumatized young people, but alive. We never returned to that house, and the memories of that night haunt us to this day. We reported everything to the police, but the man was never found. What started as a fun adventure ended in a nightmare we would never forget. That night changed us forever, making us realize that some legends have a grain of truth, and that courage can sometimes lead us to dark and dangerous places. In 2011, my family and I lived in a quaint duplex in Lemoore, CA. Despite my belief in the paranormal, I always searched for logical explanations first. But the series of unnerving events we experienced in that house left me with no other conclusion. The place was haunted. These are the compiled experiences from my family and me. The duplex was 2 stories, with our neighbors sharing a thin wall with us. Almost every night, their 4-year-old son would cry inconsolably. His wails echoed through the thin walls, disturbing our sleep. Despite the neighbors' efforts and frequent visits from a child psychologist, the crying never ceased. After only 4 months, they moved away, unable to handle the nightly terror. The first eerie encounter happened to my mom. My dad was away on a business trip, leaving her alone with us kids. One midnight, while she was taking a shower, she heard a loud commotion outside the bathroom. Assuming it was us making a racket, she yelled for us to quiet down and go to bed. Suddenly, the hardest and loudest bangs pounded on the bathroom door. She hurriedly opened it, only to find the room empty and the house silent. This terrifying event occurred 2 more times that year, each time leaving her more shaken. A few days later, we returned home after a long day out to a shocking scene in the kitchen. Dishes and utensils were scattered across the floor, many of them broken. It looked like a violent break-in, yet the doors were locked and there were no signs of forced entry. The logical side of me wanted to believe it was a prank, but deep down I knew it wasn't. My dad's experience was even more chilling. Occasionally, my mom would feel a heavy weight on her while she slept, as if someone was pressing down on her. She often thought it was my dad, but she'd find herself alone or with him on the other side of the bed. One night, my dad woke up with a strange feeling and saw a tall, thin figure standing at my mom's side of the bed. Its eyes glowed brightly in the darkness. The figure looked at my dad, then at my mom, and began sidestepping closer to her. My dad couldn't move. The only thing he could do was growl at it. The figure stopped, stared at him, then slowly turned and walked out of the room. Whether it was sleep paralysis or something else, it spooked my dad enough to start planning our move immediately. My own encounter was equally terrifying. I slept on a bunk bed and woke up one night to see my closet door open, even though I distinctly remembered closing it. Inside, I saw a faintly highlighted face staring back at me. It resembled the face from Mad Magazine. I woke my brother, who was on the bottom bunk, and asked if he saw it too. His horrified expression confirmed it wasn't just my imagination. We ran to our parents, who found the closet empty. My dad, already shaken from his own experience, didn't scold us. That night accelerated our plans to move. The final straw came on our last night in the house. My little brother woke up screaming, claiming he saw a head peering out from his closet. He was petrified, more scared than I'd ever seen him. We spent that night in a hotel and never returned to the house. The fear had become too much for us. There was one other disturbing detail that might have contributed to the hauntings. My brother had found an old noose buried in an orange dirt field nearby. He managed to untie it and used the rope to make a swing on the tree in our front yard. We later discovered that the area had once been a prison in the early 1900s. Perhaps the noose had a dark history, and disturbing it had unleashed something malevolent. We moved to another neighborhood, leaving the haunted house behind. We never experienced anything paranormal again, but the memories of that duplex still haunt us. Whenever I think about those events, a chill runs down my spine. I remain skeptical of the paranormal, always seeking logical explanations, but I can't deny what we went through. That house was haunted, and whatever resided there was far from benign. My name is Anna, and this is my story. It's a tale that still chills me to the bone, one that I've struggled to make sense of ever since. It all started when I took a job as a housekeeper at a historic mansion in a small, quaint town. The mansion, known as the Wharton House, was built in the early 1900s and had been beautifully preserved. It was a grand, imposing structure with tall windows, intricate woodwork, and a sprawling garden. Despite its beauty, the house had an eerie aura that I couldn't quite place. On my first day, I was given a tour by Mrs. Kensington, the house's current owner. She was a kind, elderly lady who had lived there her entire life. She explained my duties, which included cleaning, organizing, and occasionally helping with events. As I walked through the rooms, I couldn't shake the feeling that the house was watching me. The first few days went smoothly, but I soon began noticing odd things. At first, it was just small noises, creaks and whispers that I attributed to the house settling. Then I started feeling cold spots in certain areas, especially near the grand staircase and in the basement. Sometimes I felt an inexplicable chill run down my spine, as if unseen eyes were fixed on me. One evening, as I was tidying up the library, I heard a soft, sorrowful humming. I paused, listening intently, but the sound stopped as abruptly as it had started. I brushed it off as my imagination, but the feeling of being watched grew stronger each day. A week into my job, things escalated. I was cleaning the dining room when I saw a shadow move across the hallway. I quickly turned, but no one was there. The shadowy figure appeared several more times over the next few days, always just at the edge of my vision. It was unsettling, but I tried to remain rational. Then came the night in the basement. I was organizing old boxes when I felt a sudden, oppressive cold. The light flickered and went out, plunging me into darkness. I fumbled for my phone's flashlight, and as I turned it on, I saw a figure standing at the far end of the basement. A young woman with hollow eyes and a mournful expression. I screamed and ran up the stairs, not stopping until I was outside in the garden, gasping for breath. The next day, I decided to investigate. I searched the house and found old photographs and documents in the attic. One photo caught my eye. It was the same woman I had seen in the basement. Her name was Eliza Wharton, and she had lived in the house nearly a century ago. According to the documents, she had died under mysterious circumstances. Desperate for answers, I consulted Mr. Thompson, a local historian. He told me that Eliza's death was a mystery that had never been solved. Some believed she had been murdered, while others thought she had taken her own life. Intrigued and frightened, I also spoke to my friend Megan, who was deeply interested in the paranormal. She suggested using salt and sage to cleanse the house. Together, Megan and I performed a cleansing ritual. We walked through each room, burning sage and spreading salt. As we did, the air felt lighter, and the oppressive feeling began to lift. But I knew the true test would come at night. That evening, I braced myself for whatever might come. I was in the library when the temperature suddenly dropped. The shadowy figure appeared again, this time clearer than ever. Eliza stood before me, her eyes filled with sadness. She didn't speak, but I felt a flood of emotions, despair, longing, and a desperate need for closure. In that moment, I realized what she needed. I returned to the basement and found an old journal belonging to Eliza. It contained her final thoughts, revealing a tale of forbidden love and betrayal. She had been in love with a man her family had deemed unsuitable, and in their desperation to keep them apart, a series of tragic events had led to her death. I knew what I had to do. The next day, I took the journal to Mr. Thompson, who helped me piece together the story. We published an article in the local paper, finally telling Eliza's story and giving her the recognition she deserved. That night, Eliza appeared to me one last time. She smiled, a look of peace in her eyes, and whispered, "Thank you." Then she was gone, and the house felt warm and welcoming for the first time. I'm 30 years old now, and I still think about Eliza and the Wharton house. The experience changed me, making me more open to the mysteries of life and death. I don't know if I believe in ghosts, but I do believe in restless spirits. and the power of truth to set them free. The house stands as a testament to that, a place of history and healing, where the past finally found peace. Thank you for watching until here. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe so you don't miss the next ones. See you soon.